Hello, and welcome to the Plenty of Positivity podcast. I am your host, Courtney Beck, and today we have a very special guest, Dr. Michael Durnin. Dr. Durnin is a nationally recognized leadership expert, educator, and former championship winning coach with a distinguished career in higher education spanning coaching, teaching, and executive administration. As founder and president of Via Crucis Leadership, he delivers high impact keynotes grounded in powerful storytelling, authenticity, and his signature handful of L's framework. Guided by his philosophy, 1-0 every day in every way, Mike equips leaders to navigate uncertainty, build resilience, and lead with purpose in today's chaotic world. He also serves as president of the Chris Norton Foundation, was featured in the documentary 7 Yards, and holds a Doctor of Ministry degree. It is my absolute honor to welcome Dr. Michael Durnin.
Well, Courtney, thank you so much for that introduction. And it's just an honor, and I'm humbled to be here with you today in this conversation. And really, for the folks that listen, is basically, as I tell people all the time, walk with me, not against me. And, I think that is so important for us to continue becoming a better version of ourselves.
I absolutely love that, Mike. And I really am. I am so excited to have you on this podcast. When I was doing my research, of course, for our conversation, I am astounded by your experience in a variety of different areas. I mean, from coaching to teaching, obviously leadership. So I want to dive right into this, Mike. So if you could start with an introduction and a background of yourself.
Sure, it is. In some ways, it's almost schizophrenic. But my whole when I went to college, and this was many, many, many decades ago, my goal was I simply was going to be a PE teacher and a high school football coach. That was my goal. I wasn't thinking about anything else. Well, I got done with my undergrad, and that got thrown for a loop, because I had an opportunity to go to Mankato State University. Of course, now it's called Minnesota State University, Mankato, and become a college football coach. And that started my career in higher education. And from there, I've lived in, I think, 7 different states. So, the joke for my family as we grew up is like, all right, we didn't take vacations. We just moved to a new town. But, I was very blessed. I basically spent my career teaching people to be physical education teachers.
Mm-hmm.
I was coaching college football. And as I joke with people, that is as schizophrenic as anything, because I've actually coached every position on the football field except for the offensive line. Been a coordinator on both sides of the ball, was a head coach for a while as well. So I did all that. I also ended up taking on various administrative roles, from overseeing recreational sports and intramurals to facilities. And then I finished my career, which is a unique story, is I was overseeing all of student life at a university. And that was not my background, but at the time, it's one of those weird things that happen in our lives. The president calls me in his office, and this is 2017. It's like Christmas time, and he goes, "Mike, how would you like to do the university a favor?" Now, when the president of the university says that, you basically are almost obligated to say yes. And he goes, then he threw this at me. He goes, "I'm going to put you in charge of student life. You can be part of my cabinet." And I looked at him and I said, "Jeff, that's not my background." And his response was, "I don't care. I know how you think. I know you believe in the mission. You're the type of person I want in that role right now." So I finished my career in that role. And it was wonderful. And then as and I'm going to use the word just for reference, as I retired, and now retirement to me is a foreign language. So I knew I wanted to keep living my mission. And so I basically repurposed myself. And so I honed in on doing some things and, more things in the community. I started doing the talking and speaking. Now I've given talks since the day I started teaching a class, started coaching football, but honed it in, had people help me along the way, and just I want to share a message, and that's what I do now.
That is absolutely fantastic. And, first off, thank you for that introduction. I think about your career and how you're always willing to learn. And I think that's so important in each of these roles. Like you said, when he approached you for that position to really focus on student life, I admire that, because look at your experience though. Talk about building up to that. I always talk about this. I know Steve Jobs said it in like a particular quote, but it's true. It's like you could only understand, your life and how it like really pans out when you look back and you connect the dots. But all of that experience that you were gaining as a coach, and like you said, a variety of different positions, getting to work with different personalities of students, student athletes, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It
Oh,
really
yeah.
did. I'm sure it helped you build up to that position. And little did you know, you were the most qualified for that position. I
Well, it's interesting, Courtney, as you said that, and this is one of the things I share in most of my talks is people love to use the word journey. Now, I'm not opposed to the word journey, but journey does have a reference to mainly going on a trip, going from point A to point B. But when you use the word pilgrimage, see, the definition of pilgrimage is more of every step along the way brings you new and expanded meaning to your own life and to the lives of others. So I truly believe I've been on a pilgrimage my entire life. Every step has provided me wonderful people to get to know, wonderful experiences. Not every experience has been good in terms of, it worked out exactly like I wanted to. As a matter of fact, it's probably more of the opposite. But each of those experiences helps me continue on this pathway. So that's how I look at it.
You mentioned that, and just the reality of life, and how when we do, sometimes when we start out, we envision exactly the way it's going to be, right, Mike?
Yeah.
And we realize, like, wow, I didn't expect that to happen. But I also feel we learned so much by challenges, by adversity, overcoming adversity. And so my question for you is, you were touching upon it, but what exactly, what are your values and particular mission that really drives your life forward into these positions?
Sure. Well, I can, and I do this. And if I had a whiteboard, I'd probably do a drawing with it. But put a circle right in the middle,
Mhm,
and the core value is faith,
mhm.
and that has always been important to me. Now I know that's not for everyone, and that's okay. I'm good with that. But for me, that core value is faith. And then we have four circles around it. Family comes into, that's a value of mine. Okay. And I was blessed. I came to a two-parent home, there was lots of love there. There was some down, my father, he put his elbows on the table and say, I want to talk to you. Okay, that was going to be a little different discussion, but family's always been important.
Sure.
And then the other one is service is a value of mine. The idea of growth or continuing to learn,
Mhm.
and then grit. And I love that Angela Duckworth did a fabulous job when she brought out the book Grit, and she did her TED Talk. The light bulbs are going on in my mind, like, this is it. And because it incorporates that perseverance, the resilience, how to step forward each and every day, how to get up out of bed every day, all those things wrapped into one. Those are the core values. It doesn't mean I don't have other values, but that's the core. And then it leads into what my mission is in life, my why. And I was so thankful. Probably 20, 25 years ago, I read a book, Win Forever by Pete Carroll. Pete, of course, was a long time, college and pro, very, very successful football coach, and a good friend actually of one of my mentors. And so I read the book. In the book, Pete challenges you to write a mission statement, your why, Simon Sinek why, okay, in 25 words or less. And it took me 3 months I had the values, and it's like, all right, I got to come up with this statement. Well, that's where 1-0 every day in every way, living life, creating a transformation of self and others be better. That's my mission. And the thing about the mission is my why. The 1-0 is a great reference for me because I'm a coach. Even though I don't technically coach anymore, I'm still a coach. And so from the athletic world, you win a game, you don't win a game. You win a play, you don't win a play. The shot goes in, the shot doesn't go in. It's very statistic oriented, and it's easy to judge that. But the everyday and every way came about like, if it's good there, it should be good everywhere. So one of the things when I work with young people especially is like, all right, you're going down across a campus. You're walking down the walkway there and you see an empty Coke can sitting on the ground. What do? You walk by it, you're 0-1. You pick it up, you're 1-0. And somebody's walking by and somebody says hi to us. And you smile and say hi back to them, you're 1-0 in that moment. And if you don't, you're 0-1. Now, none of us are perfect. Mm-hmm. Yet you want to strive for as many 1-0s as opposed to 0-1 moments every day in your life, no matter what you're doing. And so you can constantly reflect upon a day and say, that was a good day. I need to do better in here, but it helps me go forward. And living life, creating transformation is, I want to transform myself to continually be better, but I want to help others along the way. So that mission, it doesn't matter whether I'm teaching a class, mm-hmm. I'm coaching, I'm an administrator, I'm a community member, I'm a family member, whatever the case may be, that mission holds true throughout. So those are my values, and that's how it leads into my mission.
I like how you mentioned that, because I do believe when you have a solid foundation with values, and you also speak about the why, but it really does allow an individual to have direction in their life and to find that sense of purpose, that sense of meaning. Because I know my younger Courtney, if you will, when I came out of my undergraduate degree, I felt kind of lost. I mean, your whole life, talk about athletic identity, but your whole life is wrapped up in sport and academics. And then you open up yourself to literally a world that you could go anywhere, you could do anything, and it could be overwhelming. And so I like your method for providing that solid foundation of what are your values for each individual, what are your values? And that really does drive the individual forward in a specific direction to either maybe fall in line with certain collaborations or to say no to certain opportunities. And so this is incredible. You were a championship winning coach. I'm so honored to speak to a championship winning coach, because there's so many lessons we could learn. But those lessons in sport, how did it maybe guide you as far as like your approach to just life, and then guiding you into your professional career that may have been outside of sport?
A great question, Courtney. And when I look at sport, life is not easy, and sport is not easy. Indiana just won a national championship, 16-0. They were perfect, okay? And kudos to them and a whole bit. And I have a lot of friends. I mean, one of my high school teammates actually played decades ago for Lee Corso at Indiana. Okay, that I just aged myself right there. But very rarely does anybody go undefeated. And if you're in athletics long enough, you're going to lose a game. You look at baseball and a great hitter is batting 300. Well, that means 7 out of 10 times they're not getting on base. They're not getting a hit. Okay. And what I really love is I think athletics is a microcosm of life in general. Each and every day, you have to work hard. You have to have a vision of what I'm going to do. You have to, keep embracing the teaching and the coaching that's going around without a definite guarantee. And life's not a definite guarantee. And so for me, the biggest thing is sport does represent life because you're going to get knocked down. And there's going to be roadblocks. There's going to be setbacks. There's going to be challenges. And how do you keep going forward? And when you learn that, I think you're learning to live life. So to me, if you base somebody's career simply on wins and losses, I think you're doing that person a disservice. And I know in the NFL, we just watched a number of people lose jobs, which is, and I've been in that role as well. It's in coaching, it's almost like not a matter if you are fired, it's when you will get kind of asked out the door. And they have different ways of doing it, of course. That affects. Here's where the real challenge is. Not that coach. The real challenge is with their families. That's the aspect most people forget. So that leads back to why one of my core values is family. Because anything and everything that has happened to you does transcend itself into your family. Yeah, sport is great. I highly recommend it. And there are other things to do in sport. So if you're a member of a band, theater, you're doing the same things. This is why I do believe it is so important for young people to have experiences. Now, it can be in different things. They could be in DECA. They could be, like I said, in the band. It could be in sport. It does not matter. It could be a team sport, individual sport. But the lessons they are learning in that sport, in that activity, strengthen their whole learning experience for living life.
That's so true. And, I reflect specifically, I had dabbled in different sports, but gymnastics, talk about physically falling a lot. When you're learning a new skill, of course, you are going to take many falls until you perfect it, of course. But I think what you're talking about with the idea of application to life is that in your career, while you might not physically, of course, fall, but you will figuratively fall, whether you do get laid off. But that idea that you really do, that you have that mentality already instilled in your mind, that you rise back up and you become even stronger if you do get laid off. And that happened to me in sales. So when you're talking about even in like coaching, sales, it was that type of mentality, especially with like acquisitions and mergers happening. You were always kind of on your toes of like what could happen. And I'll never forget, my father had warned me because he was in medical sales. And there I was doing so well. And my manager, oh my goodness, like he was fantastic. Both of them for that matter. But for the first job, it was after like a year and a half and like 70 of us were cut overnight. And it was really interesting because in that moment, I remember I was young. I had just got my first apartment and everything. It's like the harsh reality of life. And I really do. I think it's so important in those moments. And even as I look back, it was such a good lesson, even though, yes, nobody wants to get laid off, of course, but it's like, how do you adapt? And I think what you were talking about, how important the support system is that you are able to fall back on. And then at the same time, I just would love for you to speak about when you talk about how family was like, or still is, of course, one of your values, but how the sacrifice that maybe families have to make for coaches, whether that is at the high school level or even collegiate level with traveling and everything.
You know, and I look back on it now, is especially coaches in every sport's a little bit different, but it's almost a 365 days out of the year job. And it might be as simple on Christmas Day, you're texting a couple, either players and or recruits, all those things from collegiate level. It's very hard to walk away and at any time. And so you need to, and this is where, years ago I gave a talk about balance. And if you're going to equate balance to 50-50, it's not going to work. And so what you try to do is, and I had to learn this the hard way, probably as much as anything else, is when you have that time, when you have the opportunity to connect with family, that needs to be a focus. And you need to do that, because even if it's a short time, it's a good time if you truly are connected in it. And so, yeah, the time factor that coaches put into their sport, I raised 3 daughters, and of course, that's why I say I have gray hair. It's not all the years of coaching, but it's a bad joke in our family. The essence of that is I had 3 daughters, but at any one year, I probably had close to 100 sons as well.
Yeah.
And that is where you have to keep lighting your own candle so you can light the candle of others. And the fulfillment then comes from the warmth you get from all these camps.
I really like that. And, as we transition more into uh, education and just transitions in life, but you decided to go back in school to get your doctorate degree later on in your career. And so I'm just curious, what kind of drove you in that particular direction?
Great question. And people look at me and go, "What were you thinking? Why would you do that?" Because I actually did it. Remember, I said in 2017, the president came and asked me to take over student life. Well, I did that. And about a year and a half later, the university I'm working at, Dubuque, they also have a theological seminary. Of course, I'm in my role, I'm all over campus, connected to a lot of people, interacting with people all the time. After a while, one of them came and said, "Mike, have you ever thought about getting your doctorate in ministry?" And I'm thinking, I said, one, okay. And I knew enough about what was going on in university. I said, "Don't you have to be an ordained minister to be in the program?" "Well, we've had that, but we might want to try this with you." And I said, "Okay." So we went back and forth, back and forth. And, I said, why do you say that? "Well, we see how you're dealing with students. We see how you work on this campus. You're very pastoral, so to speak, in how you approach everything." And so we went back and forth. So gotta listen to the timeline here. Okay. In February of 2020, I started my doctorate in ministry. And at the age of 60. And it was the best decision I ever made in my life. Because here I'm with a cohort of people, there's like 8 of us, and I'm the only one who's not an ordained minister. And we're meeting, of course, it's all virtual, and the program was virtual, so it was easy to do. That didn't stop them. But I'm doing that, and I'm reading all these materials in these discussions, and I'm using every single bit of it into my job at the university. And because at the same time, I'm part of a 3-person team. When we started this, I'm part of the 3-person team that's handling all the COVID operations for the university, overseeing the whole thing. Now, that was a little bit of a trying time. So I'm doing this doctorate work, reading, upwards of 3 to 4 dozen books a year, working at a university. But it was still the best decision I ever made. And it falls in line as I tell people. And I actually retired, quote unquote, retired before I even got my actual diploma. But it allowed me to actually live when we'll talk about one of my L's. And that was really important. And, because I really believe, I talk about this leadership, to make it visible. You got to understand each and every day, everything you say and do sends a message. And so what message are you sending? And that gap between knowing and doing is huge for a lot of people. A lot of people know what to do, but do they do it? It's why everybody knows what it takes to be healthy, things, strategies, so forth. What about doing? And so this is what I figured as I went along, it became clearer and clearer. I was meant to do that. Even though I do some retreats based upon my dissertation, et cetera, which is related to leadership. But yeah.
I think that that's absolutely fantastic. And I admire people to go back to school. And I really do. It doesn't matter what age, but I really think it sends the message too, is that you can never stop learning in any subject, anyone that particularly like that interests you, or that you think could further with you furthering your education, how you could help others. And just like you were saying, all those students, you were applying that knowledge literally as you went on to people in your life. And I think that's powerful. And so my next question is, with the knowledge that you gained, and you had just mentioned it, but the handful of L's, I would love for you to speak about that framework of leadership.
We've touched on some of it already, but here it is in a nutshell. This goes back to being a football coach. You keep things simple. All right. Some people hear an NFL coach call a play and it sounds like that's a paragraph. Well, what they're doing is actually the play only like a couple words speak to each player. And so they're almost telling all 11 people what exactly to do. And so the only one who has to know all of it is basically the quarterback. But I love things that are simple. And as I have studied and read, and one of the biggest mistakes I did in life was the first probably 15 years as I was a professional, is the only thing I would read was what's the new playbook in terms of, the X's and O's. And then I started reading. And now I have a room full of books and I continue to read. I'm on book number 4 for 2026 right now. And to me, you do that. And when you do it, it kept coming up. There's a foundation. And the foundation for first leading ourselves, and then if applicable, leading others. And to be able to make that transformation, that's why I use that transformation, create a transformation of self and others to be better. It's built on a foundation. I always use the story, or not always, but a lot of times I use the story, the 3 little pigs and the big bad wolf. Now that old story that we all read as a kid or had somebody read it to us. Remember the pig, one pig builds a house out of straw, one does it out of sticks, one does it out of, who's best able to withstand the big bad wolf? The house out of bricks. And the big bad wolf, what does that represent? Those are all the setbacks, the challenges, the difficulties that happen in our life. We don't get rid of the big bad wolf. We're just better able to take it on. And so you want to start with a foundation. Not that the other things to, I I'm in medical sales and I need to understand what these drugs are for, or what this equipment is for, and so forth. Yeah, there's a technical side, but it starts with the foundation for all of us. And so the handful of L's, and you're not going to be surprised, Courtney, by any of these. But the first L is continue to learn. We need to continue learning. Learning is a lifetime endeavor. I joke with people, it's like the day I stop learning, you might as well, write the obituary, because we need to continue learning. We serve ourselves better and we serve others better when we continue to learn and learn a lot. We have books, you have podcasts, you have TED Talks, you have, one of the best ways to learn is be in conversation with others, and be in conversations with others that don't necessarily agree with you, because you learn from all of that. So that's your first L. Second L is continue to laugh. There's the positive. There is so much research, all right, how laughter will help with the parasympathetic nervous system in terms of boosting your energy, boosting your breathing. The health benefits are there, but it gives you more positivity each and every day. So you want to continue to laugh, and laugh for me also includes rest and renewal, because none of us are any good if our cups are empty. So we need to find time. And this is coming from a recovering workaholic, okay? Because this is where I failed miserably in much of my life. I wouldn't take time to do this. And so now I look back and say, why do I keep doing what I'm doing? I got to get this message out to people, because I don't want people doing what I did. And I think more younger people, really young people like yourself, the aspect of finding some balance or finding things that bring some joy outside of quote unquote work is more important. And I think that's a great thing. I want to keep promoting that aspect. The third L is continue to listen. As simple as that. And so foundational. You talk to any leadership experts, they talk about listening. Listening is communication. Because and listening is, people talk about listening to understand. I'm going to give you another analogy. Think of two water sprouts coming down. One hits a brick. What happens to the water when it hits a brick? It goes all over the place. The other water sprout's hitting a sponge. What does a sponge do? It soaks it up. And so we need to listen like a sponge, soaking up all the information, using that to help us be better. So now you got 3 L's: learn, laugh, listen. The fourth L, continue to live. You got to be in the arena. All right. Now I'm coach, but you have to be in the arena. All right. That's where the learning happens. You learn by doing. You're not going to be perfect. You're going to fall down. That's okay. But if you're on the sidelines doing nothing, I can guarantee you nothing's going to happen. And so you have, even, this is sound funny, even if you go play the Powerball, all right, you think, well, you did nothing for those millions of dollars. Yeah, you did. You got in a car, you made a decision, you went and got Powerball. All right, you had to do something. Okay, you have to be in the arena, otherwise nothing is going to happen. Now, I'm not a big Powerball player, but it's just an analogy I use, but it's so important. And one of a plaque my father gave me. My father's been gone since 1999. Okay, he died at the same age I am right now, and which is 67, which is the big joke, in today's world is 67. But needless to say, it's a bad joke. It's a bad joke nowadays, as even my grandchildren say. It's getting old. But the plaque he gave me is the words of Teddy Roosevelt. And it's the words, this plaque has been wherever I have lived since he gave me that plaque, which is probably almost 35 years ago. It was a plaque from his office. And since this time, I've actually replicated it, and each of my daughters have a copy of the plaque, their own plaque. And it's the word I love the quote. And I usually finish a lot of talks with this quote in honor of my father. And it's not the critic who counts, nor the person who tells us, okay, the song and stumbled, right? And the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the person who's actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood. See, it's not easy, okay? Who strives valiantly, who errs and comes short again and again, who knows the great enthusiasms and the great devotions, and spends himself in a worthy cause. Who at the best knows the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if they fail, at least fails while daring greatly, so that their place is never with those cold and timid souls that know neither victory nor defeat. See, that quote lives in me. Lives in me because that's what my father taught me. I saw him succeed immensely in business. I also saw him fail. But he never failed because he didn't try. And so I think we need to continue living. All right. So now you got 4 L's. And the 5th L, very simple, love. And it goes back and one of my posts today on LinkedIn deals with this, and it's the quote: people don't care what you know until they know that you care. And loving doesn't mean you have to like. This came from a spiritual mentor of mine. Loving doesn't mean you have to like. You don't have to like their stance. We have 2 sides of the political spectrum. And actually, within every issue, there's probably 2 sides, and it might cross paths along the way. You don't have to like, but you need to love. As Chris Voss wrote in his book, Never Split the Difference, he talked about unconditional positive regard. Same thing. He found success in dealing with terrorists by giving them unconditional positive regard. He wasn't going to agree with them, but when he brought that mindset out, he was better able to make a deal to make sure no lives were lost. And that is the most important part. So we need to continue to love. When we care and concern, we provide what I call a sacred presence for others. And again, we don't have to agree with them, but we provide a sacred presence for others. I believe we are better able to transform our own lives and the lives of others. So there's your handful of L's. Learn, laugh, listen, live, and love. Oh, and by the way, there is a bonus L. Got to have a bonus because we love finding that prize in the bottom of the cereal box or supersizing that Happy Meal or whatever the case may be. There is a bonus. And because when we continue to keep our minds and our hearts and our souls open to learning, laughing, listening, living, and loving, we end up with the bonus L of legacy. Not only the legacy that we leave unto others, but more importantly, the legacy others leave within us. So there's your handful of L's.
That was so powerful, Mike. There's so many things I want to pick apart with this. So literally, as you were talking about the quote, the man in the arena with Teddy Roosevelt, I literally have that on my vision board and I get chills every time that I read it. It is such a powerful quote of taking action. And I think it also is a good reminder, it's not the critic who counts, but that in life, when you maybe are starting something or you're trying something new, is accepting the fact that there will be mistakes that are made, but that people who are pointing the finger, that's not what matters. It's like, what is your intent as to what you're doing? Is it to positively impact this world in some capacity? Keep going. And that's just such a good quote. And it really is, it's powerful. And then you mentioned, listening, and then also like just being it caught my attention at the end. It wasn't these words, but like being present and caring about people. And I think that's becoming more and more valuable in this world where it's heavily tech driven. We always have like distractions and notifications. And sometimes we are, quote, present with somebody, but if you're on your phone, are you really listening to that individual and demonstrating that what they're saying matters? I think those are the skills as we move forward in this world that are really going to be valuable and set an individual apart. That if you can meet eye contact with that person, if it's a family member who's maybe going through troublesome times or friends, but that when you are present, you are fully fixated on that person. And that's that human connection where I really think when we think about the epidemic that had been declared back in 23 with isolation and loneliness, how do we fix that? How do we move forward and adjust our thought process? And I really do. I'm so happy that you mentioned listening and like caring for others.
Courtney, if I may interrupt, because this is something we and I do this. I still serve as an adjunct professor, and within my classes, I rarely put PowerPoints up, almost never. Okay, we talk, we have conversations, we share ideas. But one of the things that I do a lot of is we do either partner or small group work, etc., and they share ideas on what they've learned and questions and so forth. And then we go around in a bigger group. But when I do that, all right, so if you and I are talking, I'm sharing some things, okay? Me as a professor, I'm not going to call on me. I'm going to call on you and say, what did Mike say? And what it does is the only way you're going to be able to effectively answer that question is for you to have listened and be present for that person. So when you do that, and then I also say, all right, so Courtney, tell me what Mike said. Here's your start to it. Mike shared, and then you would go on and do that. You just use my name. And so when you use somebody's name, you are honoring their presence to a higher level. So I believe there are strategies, and I would love to change education so there was more of this type of interaction happening on a daily basis, because it would improve listening and it would improve that sacred presence I was talking about.
Really like that. And another kind of phrase, if you will, that came to mind is particularly active listening, where you are present, where you are fully engaged. And it almost allows that individual a sense of like greater responsibility, that when you are using someone else's name as to what they said, that of course you want to be accurate when you're talking.
Right.
And so I think that's excellent to pull together responsibility, accuracy, but then also active listening and how important that is. That's something, honestly, I've had to work on throughout my life, because especially in sales, Mike, oh my goodness, I would come out of training 2 weeks. I'm like, yes, I got the iPad. I know exactly what I'm doing. And I get to these doctors and they were like, I was so scripted. I was so robotic. And I'm thinking to myself, I even felt it, Mike, when you could feel your own self, you're like cringeworthy. Oh my gosh. But it's true. It taught me the value of actively listening and catering to their needs. Not why are you there, but what are their needs? And it kind of leads me into the direction of like different skill sets that I feel are, as we are gravitating towards a more tech driven world, emotional intelligence. And so I was curious if you could speak about the value, especially coming from a background from education, but then also being in an athletic world too, emotional intelligence and the power that it has.
Well, in my background, I've been blessed. I've been through some seminars and trainings regarding EQ and emotional intelligence, and the ability first is by doing these trainings and so forth. You learn some language, and because emotions are so expansive than just what most people would think about emotions. That rage you see somebody doing. Well, there was things that led up to that, a lot of different emotions that led up to that rage. And so we need to learn that language, and then we need to be aware of how that language resides in us. And when you do that, now you're better able to regulate and manage those emotions, because this is like coaching. You plan, all right, when they run this defense, we're going to run this player. They line up in this formation, we're going to run this defense. You plan for what you're going to do so you can remain calm. One of the greatest tools there is, all great leaders have it. They have this calmness about them, even though the inside might be highly going after it. They give that calm. And so we need to be able to recognize that, so we know what next steps we need to take. All right. And it's not to negate emotions. I think this is important. You embrace the emotions you have, and you can actually lament over it if you want to a little bit, but you better have a strategy then of how you're going to go forward in the best possible way. And part of going forward is, how do I lean into and with others to be a better version of myself?
I like that. And I like how, if you give yourself time, like you said, to address what type of emotions are you feeling, but the time that lapses between the essentially what would be the response, but then what was the action taken that ignited that emotion, that sometimes when you just stop and you process it first and not initially react, because naturally I feel like as human beings, it's like you just want to get an emotion out immediately and to show your side. But when you take time to digest it and to acknowledge what your emotions are, why are you feeling a certain way? When you are able to kind of become curious as to why that emotion triggered you or so forth, you have the capacity, like you said, to become calm under pressure when you respond. Mm-hmm. And you're pulling yourself back together, so to speak. But I'm so happy that you mentioned just like the importance of emotional intelligence, and with your background, like you said, with all your training, how that really is, that's going to, I think, even more so become more of a valuable asset for student athletes as they go into the workforce.
And I think, and I love what Mel Robbins has done with her 5-4-3-2-1. It's like you end up in these tough situations, count backwards, because it does more to slow you down than come forward. I used to, when I was in the administrative role in student life, of course, I had, student conduct was under my purview. Title IX, I had some could be, situations that people are very stressful. And you get the calls from people, either people coming to office, but what I had off to the side, and no one could see it basically unless you were sitting at my desk, is I had a picture of a stoplight, red, yellow, green. And so whenever I knew a phone call was coming in, I knew somebody was coming in on a meeting that was not going to be a good subject matter, all those things, I'd look at that sign. Stop meaning pause. Yellow meaning think about how you're going to stay calm. What are you going to say? Know your verbiage, etc. And then green meant, okay, now you're ready to go do this.
And I really do. I think visuals, like you said, if it's, excuse me, Post-it notes, just like quick reminders that are in front of you that could catch your attention before that emotion really filters through, I think is so important. That's a really good like action to take. I'm going to do that. Like I do. Well, I have my vision board and my
there you go.
motivation, but then also there's more like maybe of a need for response and how you respond to things. So I'm going to use that, Mike. I'm serious. Like I love that.
It's not an original from Mike Durnin. None of the stuff I do is original. I beg, borrow, and steal from everybody.
No,
So
I appreciate that. And like, Mike, I have to ask you, I am so intrigued by your background and how much wisdom and knowledge that you have. But what is maybe some advice? I know that with student athletes in particular, when they're ending their athletic career, whether it be right after high school or if it is collegiate or even professional, but this idea of athletic identity could be very challenging to overcome. Is there any advice that you could provide student athletes as to how they can maybe more smoothly transition into their professional career of life after sport?
and I'm going to relate it to athletics, but I think this is in general. I think this is why, number one, take time to reflect. And it doesn't have, this is not a 30-minute endeavor. Take time to reflect, what really are your values? What drives you that way? Then take time to come up with a mission statement. And a mission statement that will allow you to fulfill it no matter what you're doing. And so what do you do in terms of life after? And so, that's what I try to help people with. I did that. I'm doing that with one of my classes right now. We're looking at that. We're more interested in that aspect because in the class I have people, some are going to teach art, or they're going to be, want to coach baseball, or, whatever the case may be. All right. Why? And let's get this why, because you know what? When you discover that why, when you know what your values are and you discover that why, you will find you have a world out there that could be other professions as well. And this is really important. I had a couple of students that last semester that were like, I got to be a nurse. I got to be a nurse. I got to be a nurse. Why? What's driving you? What's your why? So we started really digging deep into that. And as they came up with their why in terms of serving and helping others, I said, here are a list of 10 other professions you could do right now besides just being a nurse. And you might find yourself, because these are students early in their career, who knows how they're going to handle, anatomy and physiology, organic chemistry, and so forth. And they might, I can't do this. And then it's like their life is over. No, it's not, because your why is still there. And so I think it's really important, athletes, to think about, all right, what drives you every day? Competition drives you. Well, there's a lot of careers you can do with competition. All right. And you can look at things in a competitive way and be successful. And so that's my advice. I think is most important, is really figuring out, take the time to know what your values are, know your why. Your why might get tweaked along the way, but my guess is the basic essence of it is going to stay the same. And, when I did the 1 and 0 every day in every way, living life, creating transformation in self and others, be better. And then I went back to a paper I wrote back when in my graduate program, this was in the early 80s. Okay. It was like a 1-page philosophy of teaching and coaching. When I look at that paper, my present mission is within that paper. I was just being, trying to fulfill requirements of making it a page long. I could sum it up in that one sentence.
That is so powerful. And I think it's something, like you said, that you could always revert back to, that really grounds you, it centers you as to what your why is. And I think another thing with a why is this idea that when challenges arise, when adversity hits, that why is going to be your driving force through those storms, so to speak. And so I think that's an excellent reflection. And I like also how you mentioned, because this has certainly happened to me throughout my life, but where you're like so fixated on one thing, and maybe you realize that you may not be headed in that direction to where you could qualify, like you said, if it's sciences. Mike, I realized in high school, sciences were not going to be a strength. It really was like, it was one of those moments where everything you were driving towards that. And you're right. Like as a young, literally almost child, but not quite, obviously adolescent, but you're thinking, like, what am I going to do then if this doesn't work? And so I do think it opens up and it broadens up your mind and your lens as to what other job descriptions, what other industries are out there that you may not even know yet because you're so young.
Yep.
So, Mike, if we could round this amazing podcast episode out with a positive quote or a positive message for our community.
All right. Well, I'm going to do this as quickly as I can because just as we were talking right there, here's what you never know. Life is going to happen. So in 2010, I'm head football coach at Luther College in Iowa, had recruited this all-American young man, great student, athlete, multi-sport athlete in high school, all those things, family of faith, whole bit. In October 16th, 2010, as a true freshman, he's running down the field on a kickoff, goes in to make a tackle, and he doesn't get up. Come to know, he's fractured C3 and C4. And his life of how he has known it is going to change. Life of his family and everybody associated with him that day, etc. Changed my life. And at the time, they said you had a 3% chance of any movement below the neck. And I still remember walking into the hospital that night. He was life flighted from Decorah, Iowa, up to Rochester, Minnesota. And I remember seeing his mom in the hallway, and she turns, gives me a hug, says, "Mike, they're saying only 3% chance, but we're going to believe in that 3%. And if I can, and it's become an amazing story. That's the Chris Norton story. And if anybody has not watched the movie 7 Yards, the documentary movie 7 Yards, it's on Amazon Prime. It's on Apple TV. It is worth 90 minutes of your time. If you have any emotions, make sure, warning here, have a box of Kleenex nearby. And it's an amazing story. And the story is this: no matter what happens in our lives, stand up, keep going forward. We control two things in our life: our attitude and our effort. Let us always keep those as positive as it can be, even when the chaos of the world is hitting around us. We control those two things. Let us live our life as fullest with our attitude and effort.
Mike, that was powerful. I mean, wow. For starters, I'm going to go watch that documentary. You said it's 7 Yards. Is that correct?
Yep. 7 Yards, the Chris Norton story.
The Chris Norton story. And then attitude and effort is what we can always control. So, Mike, I want to genuinely thank you for coming on to this podcast, sharing your knowledge, sharing your wisdom. There may be a part 2 of this, okay? Because I have so many more questions for you, Mike, but thank you so much for coming on.
Courtney, it has been an honor, and I'm humbled by having this conversation with you, and I've thoroughly loved it, and always I'm more than welcome to come back again.